Chapter 10. Alice Chan leaned against the kitchen counter, staring out at the fields beyond. The sunlight was trying its hardest to make those brown, brittle corn stalks look picturesque, casting a warm glow over what was, in truth, a wasteland. But she wasn't fooled. Her cornfield, her great adventure, was a mess. When she'd first bought the land, she thought growing food from the ground would be a natural extension of her skills. After all, she had 2 master's degrees and a PhD in computer science. How hard could growing corn be after decades of balancing network loads and routing protocols? Turns out, growing corn was harder than coding, much harder. Farming was unforgiving, and in farming, unlike coding, you couldn't just rewrite the problem away and recompile. You lost a crop early on, and you lost an entire year of revenue. She had done well in high tech. Years of climbing the corporate ladder and stock option grants had enabled her to retire early and buy her New England dream farm, complete with stone walls and rocky, unforgiving soil. But she was unused to failure, and not producing crops and revenue in the first 3 years was, in her eyes, failure. The kitchen floor creaked beneath her feet, the only sound besides the hum of the fridge. Her husband, Paul, was out mending the fences somewhere along the far side of the property, and her son was at school, no doubt plotting his next soccer game with friends. Alice took a long sip of her coffee, her gaze shifting back to the ragged rows. Last year it had been root rot, her plants drowning in the record rains that had pooled around their roots, slowly suffocating them. This year, the pests had taken over, as if the universe couldn't wait to throw the next disaster her way. Rabbits and groundhogs came first, munching the tender shoots before she even had a chance to feel proud of their growth. But the worst by far were the crows. Those sharp-beaked, beady-eyed intruders swooped in like a dark wave, pecking away at the delicate new growth until only the battered stubs remained. A murder of crows, appropriately named, perched along her fence line, cawing in the harsh, grating voices that somehow seemed to laugh at her every effort. Alice had tried all of the natural deterrents. Flannel-shirted scarecrows slumped in the field like silent guardians, aluminum pie tins that clattered in the breeze, and even a series of plastic owls on stakes. But a fierce wind had come through last week and toppled them, and now they lay scattered on the ground, looking as defeated as she felt. Nothing worked. The crows just sneered and returned, undeterred by her defenses. If she was being honest with herself, the lack of corn and muddy fields was starting to sting. Alice had never been bad at anything before. She'd built systems from scratch, managed entire data networks, and solved technical crises others had deemed impossible. And yet, here she was, beaten by crows. In spite of her disillusionment with the industry, Alice sometimes missed the tech world she'd left. The efficiency, logic, and predictability of code was a comfort. Sure, there had been more than enough dysfunctional personalities and those endless meetings, and entirely too many people threatened by her intelligence, but at least the systems themselves made sense. Code followed rules, logic was stable, and errors could be debugged. The same couldn't be said for a New England summer or the merciless whims of wildlife. A few months ago, she'd begun opening her laptop again, re-immersing herself in the open-source community. She told herself it was to keep her mind sharp. It felt good to write a few lines without the pressure of quarterly earnings looming over her head, to dive into digital puzzles where outcomes were under her control. She pulled her laptop off the kitchen table and checked her email. A new notification. An update from Stella Everdeen on one of her projects. Alice smiled. Stella was her neighbor, living just a few miles down the road, and they'd met by chance on one of Alice's afternoon walks through the fields. An easy camaraderie had formed between them. Neither was small-talk types, both more comfortable in the clear-cut world of data than in the uncertain terrain of idle conversation. They shared something rare, Lives balance between the digital and the love of nature. Alice opened the email titled The Penguin Games. Not for military use, she noted, surprised. What kind of project was Stella working on that needed such a restriction? Curiosity piqued, she opened the README file. README, The Penguin Games. The Penguin Games, Image Recognition for Conservation. Welcome to the Penguin Games, an open-source project dedicated to the identification, tracking, and cataloging of Antarctic penguins to support conservation efforts. This repository provides a fully functional AI model for penguin detection, identification, and location tagging, with a growing toolkit for broader environmental monitoring via drones and satellite imaging. Funding and resourcing are provided by LAT, in partnership with National Geographic. All rights reserved. Project Overview. The Penguin Games began with a straightforward mission: identify individual penguins within colony footage. Using neural networks trained to recognize penguin-specific characteristics, the model accomplishes a variety of tasks essential for researchers and conservationists. Version 1 includes core functions for penguin tracking and data collection, with new updates now allowing inputs from both drones and satellite sources to extend the technology scope beyond ground-level tracking. Core features, Version 1. Penguin identification and unique classification. Identification. Using image recognition, the model can detect individual penguins within high-resolution footage and still images, recognizing unique physical characteristics to distinguish individuals. Unique naming. Each detected penguin is assigned a unique identifier, drawn from a large language model, allowing researchers to track individual behaviors, interactions, and movements within and across colonies. Location tracking. Geotagging. Each penguin sighting includes GPS coordinates based on image metadata. This data allows conservationists to monitor colony distribution and migration patterns. Time-stamped data. A date timestamp accompanies each detection, ensuring chronological tracking of penguins' movements and colony dynamics. Data collection and management. Automated data logging. The system logs all identified penguins into a structured database, maintaining individual histories for long-term analysis. Data outputs. Users can export detection logs, names, timestamps, and locations for external research and reporting needs. New features, Version 2. Extended data inputs beyond ground-level footage to enable aerial tracking and monitoring. These updates make it possible to cover large land masses, especially remote areas where environmental data is critical. Merged from GH_KH, a crop monitoring branch by Garrett Bauer of the Australian Department of Agriculture. Drone integration. Automated scanning and detection. With drone integration, the Penguin Games can now detect and identify penguins and other environmental markers in real time from aerial footage. Immediate geotagging and timestamping. Drone footage provides enhanced geotagging precision and timestamping directly within the model, making data collection even more accurate. Satellite image integration. Broad-scale environmental monitoring. Satellite inputs offering the ability to track entire regions over time. This data can now be processed directly by the model. Automated alerts and event detection. Event detection, e.g. detected registered animal, based on image allowing for proactive measures. Licensing and use. The Penguin Games is a tool created for conservation and environmental monitoring efforts only. To ensure responsible use, Version 2 includes a licensing update. No military or security surveillance. This software is strictly prohibited for use in military applications, surveillance, or tracking human activity. No weapon integration. The code must not be altered to use to integrate weaponized systems. Environmental and conservation use only. All data should be collected, analyzed, and deployed solely for conservation research and environmental monitoring. Please review the full license.md for complete terms and conditions. Getting started. For setup instructions, installation requirements, and user guides, see install.md and userguide.md in the repository. The Penguin Games community is committed to building technology that enhances our understanding and stewardship of the natural world responsibly and ethically. The Australian Department of Agriculture? Alice's eyebrows rose as she read through the details in version 2 again. She went back and clicked on the branch GH_KH. Kangaroo detection, crop protection, audio scare tactics, drone integration. The branch seemed to be using Stella's system to track and deter field pests from above. Clever, 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 she thought. It was impressive, and it gave her an idea. With a spark of excitement, she bounded up the stairs, heading straight to her son's room. She knew where the drone she'd given him for Christmas lay, dusty and untouched on a shelf. He'd barely looked at it after unwrapping the shiny box, his mind much more tuned into sports than electronics. A strange twist given his mother's career as a former chief architect at Cisco, but she hadn't pushed him. Back downstairs, Alice held the drone, recalling last year's empty patches in her cornfield, the raucous calls of the crows that mocked her. She tried everything to keep them away, to no avail. Why not give this a shot? If kangaroo detection could be adapted to scare off crows, then maybe she could reclaim her field. With a grin, she sat down at the table, her mind already racing with modifications. It was time to put her skills to work. Alice's fingers flew over the keyboard, forking the GH-KH branch and spinning up a new instance in her local environment. She adjusted the detection model, tuning it specifically to recognize the size and silhouette of the crows in flight. LBBs, the birdwatchers called them. She dug up a niche dataset from a birdwatching forum, filled with images of crows in various poses, and fed it into the algorithm. Next, Alice tackled the drone APIs, the instructions that allowed different parts of her software to talk to the hardware inside the drone. Since she wasn't working with the exact drone model originally programmed in the project, Alice had to tweak the API to suit her hardware. This was no small task. She was completely unfamiliar with drones and had to figure out exactly how her drone's particular camera, GPS, and other built-in parts could understand the commands in the software. Once the drone systems were responding properly, Alice wrote a small script to activate the drone's built-in speaker. With just a few extra lines of code, she hooked it into her audio system, ready to play whatever sounds she deemed fit. Alice pondered her options, scrolling through a list of sound files she'd collected over the years. She paused, smirking as a particularly brilliant idea hit her. What if, instead of a simple air horn, she blasted something iconic? Something unmistakably loud and fierce. She could already picture the crow's feathers ruffling in surprise. She queued up her choice. The piercing, electrifying scream of Axl Rose from the opening of Welcome to the Jungle. A classic, raw, powerful yell, pure rock energy made to startle. The kind of sound that would jolt even the most fearless crow off its perch. Alice let out a laugh, imagining the scene, the crows scattering in a panic as Axl's voice tore through the fields. It felt fitting. She'd grown up on 90s rock, and if she was going to fight off pests, she might as well do it with style. She set it up in the system, grinning as she saved the file under a new name, Crow Buster. As she tested it through the drone's speakers, the scream filled the empty kitchen. She nodded, satisfied. "Take that, you feathered fiends," she muttered. This would be her rock and roll defense. Subtle? Not at all. But after watching crows descend on her corn day after day, Alice had lost all patience. If a few blasts of sound were what it took to protect her crops, then subtlety could go out the window. The lines of code began stacking up, each one falling into place with a rhythm that felt surprisingly like coming home. She tweaked parameters, adjusted audio thresholds, and ironed out the kinks with a precision she hadn't tapped into since leaving the tech world behind. As the sun dipped below the horizon outside, Alice sat back and looked at her screen. She had built herself a new kind of scarecrow, one that could take flight and meet her winged opponents on their own turf. Farming was supposed to be about getting out of high-tech, but maybe, just maybe, this blend of old and new could give her a real chance against the crows. And if it didn't, well, at least she was having fun.